My first guest today is Dr. Karan Singh. He is the oldest living parliamentarian because he was in Parliament in 1967, 2 years after I was born. Welcome, Dr. Singh, to the show. Thank you very much for joining me. Tell me what it was like in those days as the country celebrates 75 years. If I may be prepared to, and moves to a new building tomorrow. Parliament celebrates 75 years, moves to a new building. Your thoughts, what does this Parliament mean for you? Tell us what it was like when you joined in 1967.
Well, let me tell you that before I joined, I used to fly down every year to listen to Jawaharlal ji's response to the foreign affairs debate. So I only watched those from the gallery, but that was my first introduction to Parliament. Then in 1967, I became a member of the 4th Lok Sabha. And at that time, there was a lot of talent in the opposition. After Panditji left, a whole new group of people came into the cabinet with Indira Gandhi. And none of them, I think, were really outstanding, eloquent parliamentarians. They were all very able people. Babu Jagjeevan Ram was there, Morarji Bhai. But, you know, they weren't orators. But in the opposition, Hiren Mukherjee, he was my favorite speaker. He's brilliant, the way he spoke and the way he marshaled his facts and his language. He was also a Sanskritist, by the way. Then there was Indrajit Gupta was there, and the one who was speaker later, he was there. And then we had Madhulimai from the Socialist Party, very, very dangerous opposition person. Bada kashta deta tha. He used to really give a lot of trouble. Then there was my dear friend Nath Pai, a brilliant speaker, really eloquent, and you know. So these were the sort of people we had then in the Lok Sabha.
Very interesting. All these names you are suggesting, most of them communist socialists. Hiren Mukherjee, Nath Pai, Madhulimai, the great communist socialist orators in Parliament. You mentioned all these great names. How difficult for you was it to be a young government minister in those days, answering questions that were put in by all these opposition figures? Because that was the age of debate.
Well, of course, every minister, as you know, has to answer in the Lok Sabha only once a week and the Raj Sabha once a week. But it was difficult, but I always enjoyed doing it because I liked my portfolio, which was tourism and civil aviation. And I had a good grip over that. Although there were several incidents, I don't have to mention them here. But they were all very kind to me for some reason. Even Jyotirmoy Basu, he used to send me Mishti Dahi, if you please, from Calcutta. He was a very powerful man. Sab usse darte the, but he was very fond of me. I think they all had a soft corner for me. Hirendra was very kind and very generous. तो मुझे तंग नहीं करते. तंग अगर मुझे किसी ने किया तो राज्यसभा में the socialist, the so-called young Turks, Chandrasekhar, Krishnakant and Mohan Dharia, they were very bitterly against me personally. So that was much more difficult than in the Lok Sabha.
If I may ask though, Dr. Singh, you saw Parliament in the 21st century, you saw it in the 20th. What's been the biggest difference between Parliament then and now?
First of all, this whole habit of going into the well of the House, which to my view is totally unparliamentarian. I mean, you cannot do that. You cannot disrupt Parliament, for God's sake. That's our highest body. This everybody rushing into the well of the House at the drop of a hat. I mean, this is something that was most undesirable and which never used to happen earlier. I mean, there were very strong opposition people, but they would never dream of rushing into the well of the House. So that's one great difference. And the second difference seems to me to be that the sort of structured debates that used to take place, those are not taking place now. There are sporadic debates, somebody speaks for a while. A good structured debate in Parliament, Rajdeep, is an excellent thing, whether in the Lok Sabha or in the Raj Sabha. Structured debate means there is a certain clear timing given to each party. They know they've got to speak to that extent, and the minister then gives a reply. Now, those structured debates are very important, number one. Number two, the committee system is absolutely central to our parliamentary function, because the real work is often done in the committees. The advantage there is there's no television, so Rajiv isn't there. So the result is we can speak what we want to speak without fear of everybody listening in. So the committee system seems to have gradually evaporated, which is a great pity. And the third thing that I've noticed is disruption of the question hour. The question hour is sacred. In the House of Commons, for example, the question hour, because that is where the common MP who is not a minister gets a chance to ask a question and to ask supplementaries. So rushing into the well of the House, diminution of the committee system and disruption of question hour. These three are horrific developments in the 21st century.
Very well spoken, sir. Would I be right, though, in saying that the darkest hour of Parliament in the years that you were a member of Parliament was the emergency, 1975? And if I were to ask you also, what for you was the most glorious moment you saw in Parliament, what would that be?
Well, I'll tell you both. I was there for both. First of all, I agree with you that the emergency was a very, very dark chapter. And fundamental rights were suspended. No, I'm not going to go into that. Everybody is aware of what happened. Thousands of people were arrested and all. It was terrible. But the finest hour was Bangladesh. When the war was going on, people were waiting. Indira Gandhi very seldom showed any emotion. But that day she almost ran into the House. My seat used to come almost exactly behind her. She ran into the House almost and said, "Mr. Speaker, I have an announcement to make." House fell deathly silent. "Mr. Speaker, Dhaka is now the free capital of a free country." And the House exploded. You cannot imagine, Rajiv, how much joy there was for us in the creation of Bangladesh. We were all involved in our own way. And I don't think now generations can realize what a victory that was. 15 days. Mahabharata took 18 days. Our troops did in 15 days. And the surrender of General Niazi with 72,000 troops and 90,000 kilometers of land, it was a tremendous moment. And that, I think, was the most glorious moment that I've come across.
You know, wonderful to hear you speak about that 1971, as you saw Parliament, of course, the tragedy of 75, the dark hour. But there were also some great speeches over the years. I remember personally Vajpayee ji's speech in 1996, during which he lost the confidence vote. Any speech that strikes out, any favorite speech? You've seen it all from Nehru to Prime Minister Modi. Any speech or Prime Minister who stands out?
Well, it's very difficult really to zero in on any particular speech. I know that Atalji spoke very well, and Narendra Bhai is a very great orator also, there's no doubt about that. No, I don't think I can remember a particular, I can remember, I'll tell you. There was a debate on privy purses, if you please, and I was a privy purse holder, and I was on the side of the government. So all the other princes looked upon me as a traitor. And I remember my speech. For some reason, I don't remember other people's speeches. I remember my speech on that occasion. And I remember my farewell speech in the Raj Sabha. These are memorable speeches for me. You might be very egoistic for me to remember my own speeches, but that is what I remember most of all.
What is the best thing, Dr. Singh, about being a member of Parliament, and what is the most difficult thing to be a member of Parliament?
Well, the best thing about being a member of Parliament is that you get to help the people in your constituency. And that 5 crores of rupees that we used to started getting to spend in our constituency, or to take one village, adopt a village and so on, that is very, very useful, because that was greatly appreciated, and one kept in touch with the public all the time. So when you're an MP, you can't just sit in Delhi. You've got to keep in touch with the public. The difficult part is, of course, that you must behave yourself. You mustn't shout and scream. So that's not difficult for me. Reasonably well disciplined. But for some people who are compulsive speakers, they find it very difficult not to speak.
One final question. if you had a message for today's generation of MPs or wannabe MPs, what would that be? As I said, you've been part of that great generation when we had those terrific socialist, communist, Jan Sangh, Congress speakers, debates of the 60s and 70s. What would your message be to today's parliamentarians?
You see, my message to parliamentarians is haath jod ke, please do not disrupt Parliament. That is my one and only message. If you disrupt Parliament, apne pair pe kulhadi maar rahe ho. You're members of Parliament, for God's sake. How can you disrupt Parliament? That is, to my mind, the biggest request, very respectfully, which I would make to present parliamentarians. They may or may not appreciate it, but please do not disrupt the House. Let the House function. Speak as whatever you like. Speak very strongly. Call the government over the coals. Get every minister, get them down. But do not disrupt the House.
Very well spoken, Dr. Singh. Fine words. I hope parliamentarians are listening. Just in conclusion, do you ever remember running into the well of the House in all your long career over 50 years? Did you ever go into the well of the House?
No. Rajiv, I wouldn't dream of going into the well of the House.
Okay.
Never.
Wonderful to talk to you, Dr. Singh. All those rich memories that you have, and I thank you so much for joining me there. You're there in Srinagar, and thanks very much for sharing us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rajiv.
That was Dr. Karan Singh.